Today's wish comes from Matt Tenney. Matt is the author of 3 leadership books, including the national bestseller, Inspire Greatness: How to Motivate Employees with a Simple, Repeatable, and Scalable Process. His TED Talk on leading with love has been viewed over 1 million times. I'm one of those, maybe a few more than one. And he's developed a leadership program for companies like T. Rowe Price, Salesforce, Marriott, and United, among others. We're going to have a great conversation today. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Joe.
So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish that more people knew that you don't have to be some type of natural born charismatic leader to be really effective, that there is actually a simple, repeatable, science-backed algorithm that anyone can follow to be a really effective leader, and not only be effective at bringing out the best in team members, but in also finding more fulfillment and satisfaction in your work.
So you said something in the book, I'm going to paraphrase it here. Leaders who inspire greatness don't ask, how can I get more out of my people? They ask, how can I help my people become more?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of, so in the process, this repeatable process, this algorithm, there's 4 steps. And the first step is a mindset shift. So a lot of us, especially if we're new managers and we just get promoted to a management role, we think our job is now kind of an administrative thing, right? It's checking a bunch of boxes, maybe coming up with some plans, telling some people what to do. But really, the primary job of a leader of people is very, very simple. It's to bring out the best in those people, right? It's like, imagine the coach of a sports team. What's the goal of the coach of a sports team? To win a championship. How do you do that? Well, you got to bring the team together. Each individual has to be thriving, and everyone has to work together to thrive. So when leaders make this shift, and it doesn't come immediately, but little by little, if we start thinking more about, all right, what does somebody need to be great? What do they need to thrive? And I use those things interchangeably, because if someone's thriving, if you're meeting all these needs people have for thriving at work, there's a really good chance that they're going to excel at what they're doing.
So you make this management calling a call to action. And from there, where do you go?
So the real question is, how do you then actually do that on a day-to-day basis? And that's where having a process is very helpful. So in order to do it, you can't do it overnight, but little by little, this shift can happen. And it starts with the second step. So if you realize that the primary job of a leader is to bring out the best in team members. And the way I like to say it is, just maybe rewrite your job description so that it's really clear. Your job, if you're a leader, is to serve as a coach who helps people to thrive. And that's how you bring out the best in people. So the second step then is, if you want to do that, you need to know, what do people need to thrive? What do they need to be great? And fortunately, we have decades of research telling us exactly what people need to thrive in the workplace.
Right.
And there are 14 of these needs that are essentially universal. They apply to almost anyone around the world, in any country, in any type of company.
Give us some of those universal needs. 14 is a big number. Are there certain needs that seem more pressing or important to people than others?
Absolutely. And Gallup's research suggests this as well. Like, a good proxy for employee engagement, i.e., is somebody thriving? I mean, an employee who's doing great work, that's synonymous with an engaged employee, right? So Gallup's research is very helpful in this regard. They offer just a simple proxy for people who say they have a great job. There's a few components to it. They have a leader that cares about them. They find their work meaningful. They're growing. People need to feel appreciated. People need to get frequent, helpful feedback, or perhaps even better, feed forward, right? People need to have clear expectations. What's expected of them in the workplace, both in terms of what they achieve and how they achieve it. So this stuff isn't rocket. The problem is the way most of us learn when we're trained to be a leader, if we get any training at all. Then you're very fortunate if you have any leadership training at all.
Right.
But assuming you've had that, the way most people are taught is you're put in a classroom for a half a day or a day. You would learn in a great class, you'd learn all 14 of these needs and some habits for meeting them. And then people would say, go forth and prosper. And the reality is almost none of that's going to stick. And so nothing's going to change.
The part that really resonated with me, and it's the third step here, is the way that leaders should actually seek and structure their feedback. Now, most companies do that with big surveys. You think that's a big mistake. Why is that?
Well, big surveys have their purpose, right? If you want to get a good understanding of the pulse of a company, for instance, like how are engagement levels overall, or if you're a big company, you're trying to win a Great Place to Work award, big survey has its place. However, they can actually do more harm than good in terms of driving engagement. The reason that is that if we get a lot of data at once, it takes a long time to collect the data, it takes a long time to make meaning of the data, and it takes a long time to come up with a plan for how we're going to respond to the feedback. The longer it takes to respond to feedback, the more we're lowering trust in the organization, we're lowering engagement. So what I recommend, you don't necessarily have to eliminate an annual survey, but it should be, if you are going to do one, it absolutely needs to be coupled with frequent pulse surveys. That I don't even like to use the word survey. It's more of like, you could do this if you're just a manager in a small company, you don't even do surveys. The idea is you want to get little bits of feedback on things you know that you should measure and that you can measure, i.e. these 14 universal needs. You should be getting frequent feedback. I would recommend literally just 1 or 2 questions on meeting just one need, maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. Why? Because then when you get that feedback, you only have one thing you need to worry about, right? Okay, I got some feedback on how frequently I show appreciation. Great. So I can respond to that. I could go do some research. I could read a book on how to show appreciation more frequently, develop a new habit. And right there, employees see that you're responding, and that builds trust. And by the way, I think this is kind of pointing to your original intent with the question. There's no better person to get feedback from than your direct reports, the people who report to you. Your boss has somewhat of an idea of how effective you are. Your peers, maybe, but it's the people you serve as a leader who, if you really aspire to be a leader who is not only effective, but truly enjoys your work, then the connection is, I need to be meeting these 14 needs. How can I ensure that I'm meeting them? I need to get frequent feedback from the people I serve.
So you right size it, you bite size it, and as a result of making that feedback more targeted, more timely, you're getting insights that are just more useful for you, but also useful for the people around you.
Very much so. And it's actionable. If I ask for feedback on all 14 needs, let's just use you, Joe. Like, let's say you had a team of 20 people and I gave you feedback from all of them on all 14 of these needs. You're going to be overwhelmed. Where do I start? What's the most important one to start with? Like, hey, look, what if you just got feedback on one thing? Now you know where to start. It's just this one thing. That's all you have to do is respond to that feedback with some type of meaningful action. Thank your team members for the feedback. Say, hey, thank you. This is what I need to be the leader who I aspire to be. And that changes the whole dynamic. Now people are excited about giving feedback. Managers can become excited about receiving it, and vice versa. Direct reports also become more excited about feedback because now they see it as an opportunity for growth as well, not just something that's a judgment process or some administrative process.
And you said something in the book that was so simple yet so powerful, and I don't think widely practiced in many organizations, at least not the ones that I've seen. And that is almost having the training ready before you survey for those actual action items. And it's so simple and obvious, and yet so many companies don't do this. What do you have in mind by this?
That is a kind of a secret hack that I just stumbled upon. I am no genius by any stretch of the imagination. But the idea is if you ask questions and then you try to think of a plan, well, you're automatically delaying the response, right? So there's this gap. So what I recommend is that you be very thoughtful and intentional. If you're ever going to ask for feedback, make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to respond. Now, if you're not doing exploratory questions, if you're measuring things that you can measure and you should, like these 14 universal needs, these are things everybody should be measuring. We know that we should be measuring these things. Well, if you know what questions you're going to ask, you can have a training in place. If, let's say, you're a big company, you can put a video training, 5-minute quick training that goes along when managers get their feedback. It's accompanied with the training so they can immediately take action on it. But in that way, you go from, I've heard of companies, and this is not an exaggeration, where they're just finalizing their action plans 12 months after the previous survey was completed. So you could take, and so when I say, like, I recommend that you respond to feedback in a matter of 3 to 5 business days,
Great.
people say, how on earth can you do that? Well, here's the hack. Have a plan for how you're going to respond before you ask the question. And that could be, again, if it's not exploratory, if you know what you're asking, you know that you can help somebody, it could be, hey, here's an article to read. Here's a video training. Here's a book you could read. But you could respond within days. If it is exploratory, if you're asking questions you don't know what you're going to get, then you need to be intentional and say, well, who are the stakeholders? Who affects this particular question? Or who has a say or an impact on this particular question that we're dealing with? And have a plan in place to make sure, okay, if the survey is closing on February 15th, these people need to sit down on February 20th. We need to have a meeting on the calendar to talk about how we're going to address this. Otherwise, if you don't have that planned in advance, good luck getting a bunch of senior people in a room together to address it. And then you go months and months with nothing happening, trust goes down. So
Yeah,
that's the hack, is just being intentional, having a training ready before you ask the question, whenever you can.
Yeah, it's like reverse engineering the process, like digging that well before people get thirsty. It's smart.
Well, thank you.
The job of management is to inspire greatness, as you've said. And I think that's true for a lot of people, but not all people. There are some people out there who would just be very happy to coast along and not be great. So what do you do when you have someone who isn't ready to be inspired and who doesn't necessarily want to be great?
I totally agree. There are, I used to think that there were just people who were kind of born as being high achievers and those who were just not, who were just content to kind of be lazy and coast by. I don't think that's the case. And I have found no research to support that view. In fact, I found a lot of research that counters that view. I think what is really the case, and this was James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, I think really lays this out well, is there's people who have been in environments where they were pushed to have habits that help them to be great or successful or high achievers. And there are other people who were in environments that weren't, and they developed bad habits. And then these habits just create this vicious cycle of you're not performing well. You feel kind of bad about yourself. So you say, well, I'm not going to really try. I don't feel that good. And it's just self-perpetuating, right? So I think this is what happens. Whenever we say there's somebody who, quote unquote, doesn't want to be great, I think somewhere deep inside they actually do. So this is a huge opportunity for us as managers to serve as a coach and help people to be more contented and more fulfilled in their life. Because I feel very confident someone who's just not really doing anything to create an impact in the lives of others, that's really what life comes down to, right? It's what makes life meaningful. If you're just kind of coasting by, not doing anything to help anybody, you're not feeling fulfilled. If you were to ask that person, how fulfilled and happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10, they're probably a 5 or a 6. So what I would recommend, you knowing this, is to ask the person, hey, I want to check in on your well-being. How would you rate yourself, in your life in general? How fulfilled are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And if they say they're a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10, what do you think is keeping you from being an 8 or a 9? And it might take some questioning. You might have to guide them through, but I think eventually they might come to the realization for themselves. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm helping anybody. I don't feel like I'm doing anything to make an impact on the lives of other people. Right there, you've got a great opportunity to help that person not only be more effective on your team, but to meet a need that we all have, which is to feel the fulfillment of knowing we're making an impact in the lives of other people.
The book is Inspire Greatness, and the author, and he's a pretty great guy himself, is Matt Tenney. Matt, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thank you, Joe. My pleasure.